Hi everyone. Very sorry about the technical difficulties. I think the wrong passcode or no passcode was sent, so my apologies. So I'm gonna start the presentation now, even though we don't have a lot of participants, but we're gonna record the session, so I'll make it available for anyone who wasn't able to join. So thanks everyone for attending. I hope you're all doing well today. So I'm going to talk about well performance testing lesson learned. My name is Valerie Johnston. I am the Director of Indoor Environmental Quality. I've been with Pinch for 20 years, and I'm a LEED and WELL accredited professional and a registered occupational hygienist. Most of you, I'm sure, are aware that what WELL is, so I won't spend a lot of time going through this part. It's a performance-based system for measuring, certifying, and monitoring features of the built environment that impact human health and well-being through air, water, nourishment, light, fitness, comfort, and mind. So why are people pursuing WELL certification? These are some stats from the IWBI website. And there's links there. So if you go to the website, you can find the research behind these claims. So 95% of employees agree that a healthy workforce is key to a company's financial success. 80% of companies that took action on health saw an improvement to their earnings, and 30% rise in productivity was noted in Landsec's London workspace after achieving WELL certification. So what is the return on investment for WELL certified buildings? 7.7% higher rents per square foot, $115 per square foot in 10-year net present value for healthy, high-performing buildings, and an 8% increase in employee performance due to improved air quality. So full WELL certification is not the same as the WELL rating system shown here. WELL ratings are a targeted subset of strategies from the WELL building standard that focus on achieving a WELL rating in 3 specific areas. So the WELL health and safety rating became very popular during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it prioritizes disease prevention and recovery. This rating system pulls preconditions and features from the WELL building standard that focuses on health and safety of building occupants. The WELL equity rating promotes equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and the WELL performance rating focuses on building performance. So the WELL performance testing we conduct for WELL, like full WELL certification, is the same as the testing we would conduct for the WELL performance rating. One of the only differences here is there's no photo verification for other concepts, as this rating system only pursues building performance concepts, so the air, water, light, thermal, comfort, and sound. WELL performance testing agent is required for full WELL certification and for the WELL performance rating. PV testing is not required for the other 2 rating systems. So even though the WELL health and safety rating has air and water testing components, that can be done by any consultant. It doesn't have to be a WELL performance testing agent. The performance testing varies depending on which version of WELL you are pursuing. For example, if you're pursuing WELL version 1, there are more air contaminants which require testing than in later versions of WELL. The WELL building standard is constantly changing and evolving, which is great because each new iteration has improvements, but it can be very, very challenging for us and the project's teams to stay on top of all the changes. It's also very important that the testing agent knows if you are pursuing WELL certification for core or interior spaces, as the number of sampling locations will vary. So the WELL building standard concepts, they span 108 different features over 10 concepts. So it's a guide, WELL is a guide for improving the quality of air, water, and light with inspired design decisions to create healthier buildings. So the 10 WELL concepts address the following themes. So air, water, nourishment, light, movement, thermal comfort, sound, materials, mind, and community. So each WELL concept includes features that address design changes and can help any building or organization better serve the health of its customers, employees, and visitors. And each one has parts that include specific requirements, standards, or thresholds. So there's 2 types. So preconditions and optimizations. So preconditions are mandatory requirements that are considered to be fundamental to WELL certification. And then preconditions, so they don't award points. but you must achieve those to be certified. And then projects can also earn points through optional features known as optimizations. Each project can select which optimizations to pursue and which parts to focus on within each optimization. Certification levels, it can be from bronze to platinum, depending on how many points that you achieve. Kind of noted the points here. So obviously platinum certification is the highest that you can achieve. The WELL certification process is here. So documentation can actually be done concurrently with PV testing, so the performance testing. I will say that on 90% of the projects we've worked on, documentation phase is completed before we get involved in doing the testing, but they can be done at the same time. Then you have your certification, and then recertification is required every 3 years. And to note here, I have another slide later, but ongoing annual reporting is required for some of the features. So Pynchon's been a well performance testing organization for 4 years. So to become a well performance testing organization, you must have one WELL AP and one WELL performance testing agent on staff. You must complete and submit for approval a WELL performance testing quality assurance manual. You do have to pay an annual fee for the organization and for each testing agent. And then we are subject to quarterly audits by GBCI on the quality of our work and our submissions. And WELL performance testing agent must complete a 2-day training course. So Pynchon has actually been performing similar testing to the WELL testing for 40 years for our clients. So in the areas of air, water, light, sound, and thermal comfort. So it seemed to be a perfect fit for us to become a WELL performance testing organization. So PV testing is required in these 5 categories, depending on the WELL version you are following and the features that you're pursuing. Every WELL certification project will have air, water, light, and thermal comfort performance testing, as there are preconditions in each of these categories. The performance testing agent is also responsible for photo verification in other concept areas. So under the air concept, there is a precondition and one feature that require performance testing. For the feature, it is most of the same parameters measured for the precondition, but they are subject to more stringent criteria. So just some examples here of kind of what the air testing setup looks like. So we need to collect several photos of each sampling location as part of our submission package. All photos need to be geotagged, and we need to prove all air samples were collected within a certain distance away from walls and doors. We also have to prove that samples were collected at breathing height. We use a combination of direct reading instruments set to data log for 1 hour at each location and analytical samples that must be submitted to the lab. For data logging, we must sort through all the raw data to find the median of the last 50 minutes of collected data to determine the sample value and provide copies of this raw data in our submission package. We also have to prove, all our analytical samples are calibrated on site at each location and provide photos proving that. So some of our lessons learned on the air concept. In core projects, it can be difficult to achieve particulate. We're often testing in high traffic areas such as elevator lobbies and the main lobby of the building. Also, if there's any construction or renovation occurring in tenant areas during core testing, that can impact the particulate and VOC air results. For all projects, VOC and formaldehyde concentration can be difficult to achieve if there are new finishes and furnishings in the space. Formaldehyde is most challenging when you have new desks or millwork or any pressed wood products. So the point here is try to allow as much time as possible for off-gassing if you do have new finishes in the space. Under the water concept, there's two preconditions and one feature that require performance testing. The feature is the same parameters as the drinking water quality precondition, but more stringent criteria to meet. And of note here for the precondition W02, part 2 usually is fulfilled by submitting a municipal water quality report. So we need to provide photo documentation of every area we test, multiple photos indicating kind of the water quality that we're seeing. And we also need to document the types of filtration systems present. Most of the water samples are submitted to a lab for analysis, but there are a few measurements such as turbidity and chlorine that are collected with direct reading instruments. So the lessons learned for water, we do find that the water testing is one of the most successful on most projects during the first round of testing. For interior projects, turbidity can be difficult to meet if the building's plumbing systems are older. So in this case, additional filtration may be required within the interior project space to meet the criteria. Pre-testing can also be conducted as part of W05, Part 1, where points can be achieved. The pre-testing must be conducted 1 month prior to the performance testing. Under the light concept, there is one precondition and one feature that require performance testing. Light testing must be conducted at night to avoid sunlight, so electric lighting levels can be accurately measured. So some of the lessons learned on this one. Light testing, because we have to do it at night after sunset, we have found that many buildings have setback schedules for lighting, and not all lighting comes on properly at night. This has caused retesting in some scenarios as lighting levels were measured below the criteria. For sound, there are no preconditions, but 3 possible features to pursue, which require performance testing. Sound testing must be done outside of regular hours, as we can have no interference with noise from occupants. Some clients don't pursue any of the sound features, but if they do, S02, so the background maximum noise levels, is the most popular. Here we measure background noise levels over a period of 5 minutes, and then average sound pressure levels must meet the criteria in the different room types. So again, we have to take photos of readings from our instruments, as well as proving we are measuring a certain distance from walls. For S04, we need to pop a balloon of a certain size and measure reverberation time. The submission package we're required to submit must include calibration certificates of all equipment and lab accreditation certificates for any labs we use. We must also include all geotag photos, rough field notes, raw data files from equipment, and all calculations that we have completed. So some of the lessons learned on sound. For S02, we've noticed improper design or selection of HVAC systems in some cases. For example, heat pumps above a suspended ceiling are typically too loud to meet the S02 criteria in the spaces directly below. Aging HVAC systems become noisier due to degradation and potential lack of maintenance. If testing is required in a room directly below the mechanical room, it is difficult to pass due to loud noises from HVAC equipment and other machinery. We have had instances where loud vending machines and refrigerators have impacted test results, and loud fans in server rooms adjacent to an office area. For S03, we have had some failures due to door and ceiling leakage. For suspended ceilings shared by 2 different areas, the sound can travel readily between if there are no barriers present. For thermal comfort, there is one precondition and one feature which require testing. We use the data from the precondition to determine if the feature criteria can be met. So thermal data loggers are placed at 3 heights. So the heights must be adjusted to either a sitting or a standing height. We use seating height in desk and office locations and a standing height if we're testing in corridors or lobbies. We test in 10 minutes at each location. We take the data from the 3 data loggers at each location and calculate the average, and then take the median of the 3 averages. We use a globe thermometer to help calculate the radiant temperature. And once we have calculated our data, we then need to input it into the ASHRAE 55 comfort tool to determine if it meets ASHRAE criteria. So this is the tool here. You can see in this example that the red dot falls within this blue band. So that means it complies with ASHRAE 55. So what I want to draw your attention to is this metabolic rate and the clothing levels in the bottom left here. So we are required as the testing agent to use the metabolic and clothing rates provided by the project team during the documentation phase, if the documentation phase happens before the testing. On most of our projects, we are seeing only one metabolic rate and clothing level provided for winter and one for summer, and we are bound to these values. So even if we see people on site during the testing wearing sweaters and long sleeve shirts, we are not allowed to adjust the clothing level if during documentation phase, the project team noted that short sleeve shirts would be worn. So if you can provide more variety of clothing and metabolic rates during documentation phase, it increases the chances of meeting ASHRAE criteria. In many of our projects in Ontario, we have difficulty meeting ASHRAE criteria, especially during winter and summer months. So the lessons learned for thermal comfort: difficult to meet when we have limited clothing values to work with for the ASHRAE calculations. Many buildings in Ontario are challenged by low relative humidity during winter months and can't meet the T07 criteria of 30 to 60% relative humidity. We have also found that doing thermal testing first thing in the morning is not successful, as building temperatures are often cooler at the beginning of the day. So every concept requires photoverification for certain features, and often requires the testing agent to access areas of the building they wouldn't be accessing for the testing components. So just something to keep in mind. Ongoing annual reporting. So once the building is well certified, there's ongoing reporting that is required annually. The first round of ongoing reporting must be uploaded prior to the first anniversary of your building becoming well certified. Thermal testing is required annually in both winter and summer months. Air testing is required annually. Water testing is also required annually, but can often be covered by submitting a municipal water report. If you don't complete the annual ongoing reporting, you will have to complete full certification again instead of recertification. Recertification is much easier, as you don't need to pass all of the sound and light features again unless major changes were made to the building. So just some final summary notes. So there's several different versions of WELL, and they're very different. So we need to be very careful what we are testing to the proper version and which features in each version. The standard and guidebook are always changing and improving, so we need to ensure we're using the most up-to-date versions. Typically, we need at least 2 weeks notice prior to any testing to organize equipment and sampling needed, as there is some difficulty with rental and availability of equipment. The WELL criteria is difficult to achieve, and most projects will have something fail during the first round of testing. Nothing is submitted to GBCI for review until we are confident that all data has passed. So if we find any failures during our PV testing, we will work with the client to reschedule testing that one failed parameter before we upload everything to the portal for review by GBCI. Sound and light testing must be conducted outside regular hours, but air and thermal must be done during occupied hours. So there will always be a minimum of 2 site visits for the testing. The building or area to be tested must be at least 50% occupied before testing can commence. So unfortunately, if you are pursuing both LEED and WELL, the air testing cannot occur at the same time, as LEED is done prior to occupancy and WELL is done following occupancy. So Do we have any questions? I did run through that quickly because I know we're short on time. So if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and I can respond. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so I guess that is it. But I will. We did do a recording, so the recording will be put up. Oh, I see one question in the chat. Where are our testing agents located? So we have several testing agents in Toronto. We also have a testing agent in British Columbia, so Richmond, BC. Yeah, so sorry everyone. There was issues with the login information. So the presentation has been recorded and we will share the presentation with everyone. And we'll also provide a link, I think, to our website of where that presentation will be. So someone asked, how long does it typically take to complete all the PV testing? So it will vary on the size of your building, how many floors, but typically, a very small building, you're going to have probably 2 days on site. A large building could be a week or maybe even 2 weeks on site for the performance verification testing. Costing will depend on the size of the building and the features that you're pursuing. So, I mean, at the low end, you're probably looking at $10,000 for a very small project, but it could be up to $75,000 for a larger project. And what other questions do we have? Yeah, someone's asking if we're seeing difficulty with older buildings. Yeah, so I think the problem we've had in older buildings mainly relates to water. So turbidity in water, we're having difficulty with if you have older plumbing systems in buildings. Sometimes particulate in the air can be a difficulty. And I'd say what constitutes old, something 50 years old or older. But honestly, we're having pretty good success in those buildings with a lot of the parameters, even if they're slightly older. How long between the site visits and getting the results back? So typically, because we have a lot of analytical data that we're waiting for the lab to get back to us, it's usually about 3 weeks from when we finish the testing to get you a report back. And we would let you know right away if anything has failed and we have to do a return visit. For GBCI, they typically have a 5-week turnaround to review our results and then provide a preliminary report back to you on if everything has passed or if they have any questions. When you talk about multiple clothing and MET values, should we submit multiple analysis during documentation? And when you do the testing, if one meets, we pass. Yes, I would recommend if you can submit multiple clothing and metabolic values, you have much greater opportunity of passing. That's been kind of our biggest issue on most of our projects here in Canada, in Ontario. So yes, I would say give a couple options because especially with, spring, you're not necessarily going to have people wearing jackets. You may have people wearing short sleeves, but you could have a day where people are wearing sweaters, right? Because it's such a swing in the temperatures here. So yeah, Tina, I would say submit a couple options and then you pick which one for the testing. We can pick which one for the testing. Amy asked, can testing agent be from the client or the design team? Okay, so my understanding on conflict of interest is if you have 2 separate teams working on the project, as long as they are not in contact about the project, they may be able to both work on the same project. For example, if you are the WELL certification, consultant, and then you also have a testing team, you cannot be in contact with each other about that particular project. But you do have to clear that sort of conflict with IWBI before you start the project. Does the fee include retesting? No. So with the retesting, we would not know which ones are going to fail. So the retesting fee is basically an additional cost for anything that has failed that we'd have to retest for. And there's different prices depending. Like the air features are typically more expensive than, say, the water testing. So if water fails, it's a cheaper fee to retest than air, as one example. I don't think I'm seeing any more questions. Let me just double check. Have buildings been successful achieving WELL Gold? Or do clients typically aim for the lowest? Yes, people have been getting gold and platinum certification for sure. We are seeing a lot of our clients asking for kind of a lower level WELL certification. And do be aware that not everything you're aiming for will pass, not just on the testing phase, but on the documentation review. We are seeing things get submitted that GBCI isn't accepting. So you just have to have, additional optional credits that you think may or may not pass. And metabolic and clothing rates cannot be assumed by the testing agents based on his or her observations. No, we've tried to do that and we've argued that point with GBCI and IWBI. We cannot. So if the documentation phase said short sleeve shirts were going to be worn, and we went to site and everybody's wearing sweaters and we tried to use that clothing value, it was rejected and they denied the credit. So unfortunately, we have to use what is provided during the documentation phase. And I believe that is all the questions. Oh, and Amy, 30 to 60% range. How challenging to achieve it when the building has no humidification devices? Extremely challenging, nearly impossible, especially in Ontario. So I would say, you could definitely achieve the precondition for thermal, but if you're trying to get that T07 point, it is going to be very difficult to get, especially in the winter. We have not had a lot of success on that one, unfortunately, with our clients. So when is the best time to schedule the site visit during operating hours? Yeah, so we have to do the air and thermal during regular occupied hours. So 9 to 5. Like I mentioned, thermal is best if we do it at least starting after 10 or 11 a.m. because HVAC systems sometimes don't come on until 9 a.m. or just before occupancy. We find temperatures are a bit too low to meet that criteria. So yes, and then the other testing has to be done after hours, right? So the light and the sound. Is there a best season to test? For thermal, I would say if you can test in the spring or fall, you're going to have better success with that. I know for this past summer, like last year, we had a lot of difficulty achieving air in the summer months because of the wildfire issue that was occurring. So yes, I would say the shoulder seasons might be easier to achieve some of the criteria. Amy, can we install local devices, so humidifiers or dehumidifiers? My understanding is if they're going to be a permanent sort of fixture, you might be able to do that to get passing results, but that's a good question. I don't 100% know the answer to that one, and if IWBI and GBCI would accept that or not. I think I've answered everyone's questions. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I am very sorry about the technical issues at the beginning, and it started late and I kind of rushed through it, but I hope that some of it was valuable information for everybody, and there will be a recording available. So thanks very much for joining. I hope everybody has a great day. Thanks. Bye.